All right, I would like to introduce you to Kristen Streifel. And Kristen is going to be speaking to us tonight about grit and resilience. And that is something that we're all in desperate need of at the moment with everything that's going on around us with the pandemic and with the closing down of curling and the distancing of people. So Kristen's resume. Kristen is currently curling third for Team Silvernagle. She's a former skip of the University of Alberta Pandas, Universiade Games, and the World Junior Curling Championships, Canadian Junior Nationals, U Sport National Championships, and the U18 Optimist Internationals. So she brings a wealth of curling experience and success with her. Kristen has her Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology. She has a certificate in Interdisciplinary Leadership. She's a certified personal trainer for the Canadian Society of Exercise Physiology, and she's also an advanced adventure medic. In fact, she was just talking earlier before you all came on about how she had done some winter cold water, freezing water survival training. In her career, she's a mental health educator with the RCMP, and she's an athletic therapist. So thank you very much, Kristen, for agreeing to speak to us about grit and resilience. The floor is all yours.
Wow, thank you for that bio. That was fun to listen to that. Well, thanks, Andrea. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to speak with all of you tonight. Definitely a perk of COVID, the fact that we can all be together from different provinces in one Zoom room, I guess. On a Wednesday night. So that's a positive and I'll take it. Just a few things to mention. I've got two screens going here and I can see half of you on one screen and the other half up here. So if I'm kind of looking both ways, that's why. And so I think we will probably go past 60 minutes for sure. I'm thinking about 90 minutes, but as Andrea mentioned, I do want to make this pretty interactive if possible. So if you have an interesting story or if you want to make a comment or you have a question, please feel free to just unmute yourself. And if you cut me off and you're talking, that's fine. The floor will be yours. If you want to simply put your comment in the chat box, we can get to it at the end when we have a discussion. So totally up to you guys. Again, it's a lot easier when we're in a classroom to have those open, easy, candid conversations, but we'll try to make the best possible with Zoom here tonight. So the other really interesting thing about this is the fact that I'm not a whole lot older than a lot of you on this call right now. So there isn't much of an age difference between some of you and myself, and probably half of you are actually older than me. But in many ways, I just want to say that we're all on very similar pages in terms of figuring out this game of curling, trying to balance it with our everyday lives, and also trying to find our way in this world. So by no means do I claim to be an expert in anything that we're going to be talking about today. And I'm sure if the tables were reversed, I could learn just as much from each and every one of you with different topics. So that's the fun part about this, is that we're all students of the game and we can all learn from each other. And that being said, it was definitely a challenge coming up with tonight's content because there's so much depth in this room. And I was looking at everybody that registered and thinking, oh boy, I'm sure that lots of you have heard a lot about what I'm going to be talking about tonight, but we're all coming at it through different angles. And so your time is a huge investment. And the fact that you're spending 90 minutes with me here tonight, I hope that you'll really try hard to get something out of this. And if you come away with one thing that you're going to work on or one skill that's going to be new to you, then you can check that box. And that is the goal for me here tonight. So as curlers, you're all very studious, very smart, very driven individuals. So I don't discount that at all when I'm talking about any of the things that we will be discussing. All right, so I'm going to challenge you to grab a pen and a piece of paper. And I do, to just try to keep your mind active and stay engaged, please write down any fleeting comments that pop into your mind or I'm going to be asking you some questions. So I hope that you'll write down the answers to some of these things. And if you don't get a chance to comment on them during this presentation, I hope that you will go home and debrief while you're at home. But maybe you want to debrief this with your family or your parents, or maybe you want to start this conversation with your teammates. Maybe some of your teammates are on this call tonight. Maybe your coach is here. So you're going to have that common ground. And I hope that this is going to discussion. So I actually gathered all my notebooks from the past, I guess this would be the past 6 seasons. So every season I get a notebook, and this is the stuff that I write down that I learned from coaches during a practice, or maybe my teammates, something that they said off the cuff. And after a practice or a game, I'll just quickly debrief kind of my own notes. And I love looking back to my notebook from 5 years ago, because it's given me kind of a baseline to see how much I've grown as a player. So I encourage all of you to do a bit of journaling in that sense so that you can reflect back. All right, so today's presentation is on grit and resilience. And quite honestly, a lot of things that we're going to be talking about in this presentation could be applied to every and all aspects of your life. And the intent of this presentation is that it won't just be talking about everything that's curling specific. I hope that you can apply this to all areas. There's a famous quote that says, you won't always remember what people say, but you will remember how they make you feel. And feelings are what drive habit. So it takes 21 days to form a habit. And I hope that, again, after this presentation, it's going to make you feel a certain way, and you're going to create a new habit from it. Okay, so a bit of an introduction. Andrea did introduce me, but I thought I'd show a bit of a then versus now. So this is one of the first pictures I think that was ever taken, that I know of anyways. And this is when my mom would have been playing Super League on a couple sheets over, and this would have been really late at night, probably 10 p.m. past my bedtime for sure. And it's safe to say that my slide has come quite a long ways since then. I can now hold on onto the rock right to the hog line. That is a big accomplishment. And I think right after this picture was taken, I can vividly remember getting in trouble from the ice maker because I was wearing rubber boots. And then I also was sitting on the rock, riding it down as my brother was sweeping, and somebody else had thrown the rock, obviously. But the cool thing is that I'm sure all of you have some type of story like that. And I also put a picture up of my grandpa because he's somebody that gives me a lot of perspective. And I would say that a lot of those medals around his neck, I won because of him. And again, the neat thing about curling is that it usually runs in the family, or people have a really interesting story about how they got involved with the game because it is unique. And then lastly, I threw a picture up here. This is one of my proudest moments. And I thought it was fitting because I know that a lot of you are students right now. And we're going to be talking about how we can manage our time the best we can. But making that transition from juniors into men's or ladies is a huge transition in itself. And then you couple that on top of being a full-time student. And looking back, once you go through all of that, you are going to be so proud of yourself. And that's probably one of the hardest stages of life that you're ever going to be in. And I just really encourage you guys to know that you can 100% pursue a career and also stay on top of your game. So if you want to connect with me as well, I can send out my contact information afterwards, but I put my Instagram up there just because I know a lot of you do use that as a social media platform, and also my email if you have any questions. Okay, I'm going to play this video for you because I think that it's really important that we talk about the new kid on the block, which is a bit of a bully, but its name is COVID, and it has been here to stay for a little while. past its welcome, that's for sure. But if we don't talk about the elephant in the room right now, it's always going to be lingering. So we're just going to get it out. I'm sure it'll come back up in discussion. But one of the things I love about this video is at the very end, they say that the one thing that we can get out of this is preparing ourselves to be in a better situation after the pause. And that really, really hit home for me, because I think that we can look at this as a hardship or an opportunity, and everybody's experience with COVID is totally different. Some of you maybe did lose a loved one to it. Maybe you actually had COVID. It's hit us all in different ways, but there's a lot of positives to come from it. So this video might take a little bit to buffer, but we'll see if it.
The whole world would change. The whole world. Would you prepare for it like they did Y2K? Would you? What if I told you that 2020 would be a year filled with disasters? Filled with them. Is that what you envision with 2020 vision? Major earthquakes, hurricanes, tsunamis, cyclones, locust plagues, floods, bushfires, and even a pandemic? What if I told you in March thousands would die and the whole world would be on pause? When God decided to push play, would you still be in the same place? What if I told you that 2020 had a glitch in the system and that this was the opportunity for you to accomplish all that you envisioned? Would you take the opportunity by the hand and let it lead you? Just take it. God is saying, sit still and let the world heal. So all your excuses that you don't have enough time, that you're too busy and too tired, throw them all out the window. That's true. Because now you have more than enough time. More than enough. That 9 to 5 that you're worried about, it'll still be there. But that dream that you dream as a kid is waiting for you to chase it. Chase your dream. This is not the time to dream while you're asleep. Wake up. This is the time for you to dream while you're awake. Wake up. Wake up. Don't let this opportunity pass you by. Don't let it. It's time to work on yourself. If you wanted to lose weight, this is the time. This is the time. If you wanted to start a business, this is the time. This is the time. If you wanted to rekindle a relationship with a family member or a friend, this is the time. This is the time. Because people are dying and every second counts. Every second. The question that we don't have the answer to is, will you be the next to go? Will you be next? What you can control every day that your eyes open up and your feet hit the floor is working on your failed in the past. So don't let that discourage you. It wasn't your time. This is your time, because failure is not the end unless you quit and never try again. A lot of people are getting knocked down, but this time they're not getting back up. So you've been knocked down before, but you got back up. But don't just get back up just to get knocked back down. Get up and fight. This is the fight of your life. So if you get knocked down and have an opportunity to get back up, take advantage of it. Because that means the fight is not over. It's not over. You still have a chance to come out victorious. You still have a chance to win. You still have the chance to be great. Be great. As long as it's a chance, there's hope. And where there's hope, there's a way. You just have to have a little bit of faith. No, it won't be easy. No. But you have to fight on, and you get nothing free. Nothing. You got to earn everything you get. Everything. In 2019, you said you were going to do it. In 2018, you said you were going to do it. In 2017, you couldn't wait till 2018 because you were going to do it. Now it's 2020. What are you going to do? We can't reset 2020. But one thing we can do is prepare to be in a better situation after the pause.
All right. Well, that video really, really gives me a lot of goosebumps. So the first questions I'm going to ask you, and I hope that you're writing this down, is how many of you are seizing this opportunity, and what are you doing to seize the opportunity? How many of you have rekindled a relationship that was potentially fizzling out? And how many of you are going to return to that curling ice stronger than you've ever been before? And I can vividly remember just about this time last year, I think it was 13th, Friday the 13th, and there was lots of talk at work that we were being sent home and we'd be working from home. And I remember even reading a lot of news in the media about the virus being in China, and slowly it was making our way over to us. And we were sent home, and the next morning I woke up and I remember thinking, okay, this is going to be my opportunity, because everything's going to be on pause for a little bit. So I'm going to really work on my mental and physical health for 2 reasons. Because number one, if I get this virus, I want to be in the best possible physical and mental state to be able to deal with it, because it was very scary at the time. You didn't know, you don't know what kind of symptoms you're going to experience or how it's going to affect you. And number two, I thought, okay, I can really return to curling better than I've ever been before, because I never felt like I had enough time in the past. So I remember actually feeling quite peaceful in the beginning of the pandemic, because it did slow everything down. And for a lot of people, it gave a lot of perspective. You're not always going to be able to find perspective, but it will find you at some point. Okay, so this is the meat and potatoes of this presentation. And the $1 million question is, how do we build resiliency? And my answer for you guys today is to be able to focus on all these areas of all these dimensions of wellness, because it is a total approach. And I think in the past, sometimes we've got stuck thinking that wellness only refers to your mental or physical health, but there's so many other areas that we need to be on top of. You're not going to be 100% in all these areas, and you're never going to have perfect balance. That's one thing I talk a lot about with RCMP, is that they always say they struggle with work-life balance, but the two are never going to be 50-50. There's going to be times when you have to prioritize work, and there's going to be times when you have to prioritize other life things. And it's the same with all these 8. So they're going to work in harmony, hopefully, if you can learn to balance all of them. So we've got the 8 dimensions here. So we've got mental health, occupational, intellectual, environmental, financial, physical, social, and spiritual. And that's a bit of a mouthful, but we're going to break it down and kind of go through each one of these. So on a scale of 1 to 10, and again, write this down, how would you rate yourself in all these areas? Because I can honestly say that 3 years ago, I wasn't even thinking about environmental health. Financial health, yes, a little bit. We're going to talk about some scholarships and stuff to help with that later on. But spiritual, there's some areas that I actually just didn't really put much thought into at all. All right. A perfect example of this would be players that went into the bubble this year. So with the Scotties and the Brier and mixed doubles. So think about how they had to try to keep all these things in check leading up to being in the bubble and when they were actually in the bubble. So think about their financial and occupational health, for example. Some of them actually chose not to go into the bubble because they couldn't take that much time off work, because maybe their work wasn't going to allow them that time off and still be paying them. Some of them didn't have childcare. Some of them took their babies into the bubble. Then think about those players actually being in the bubble and having to take care of their mental health and the factors, the isolation factors. There's no distractions that you usually have with a big crowd. And I can't speak to exactly what their experience was like because I wasn't there, but I can only imagine how difficult this was to compete in that environment. And the social health. So you're so close to all these other teams that normally you'd be able to socialize with, but at the end of a tough game, you're going back to your hotel room and you were just by yourself. So you had to be very mentally strong and physically as well. A lot of those players didn't have the chance to be on the ice or weren't allowed to be on the ice for a certain period of time before they got to the bubble. And we all know how hard it is to mimic the stamina you need for sweeping, for example, in just off ice workouts. So all of these factors came into play for all those players. And again, I remember talking to my sports psychologist when we were potentially going to be a team that was going to be considered to go as Team Saskatchewan, Team Silvernagle. And I said to my sports psychologist, I'm feeling kind of guilty if we get chosen because this isn't how I saw competing at my first Scotties. I didn't think that I would just be granted a spot there without earning it. And that's another factor, I think, for some of these players is that they were chosen to go versus winning their way. So they had the added pressure of feeling like they needed to prove themselves and that the team needed to prove themselves. And my sports psychologist said, yeah, I mean, this is an unprecedented situation. none of us have the experience or the know-how to know exactly how to deal with that added new pressure. This book, and I'm going to make a few book recommendations, and I feel like I'm giving away some of my secrets when I tell you guys this, and you'll probably use them to beat me down the road. So this could backfire, but we'll see how many of you actually read them. So the first one is Relentless by Tim Grover. And this is a really, really great book because it talks about, we all know you're athletes, but what kind of athlete you are. And when you can identify what kind of athlete you are, you figure out how you work best with other teammates and what kind of attributes you might look for in your other teammates or in your coach, because you need to make sure that you're all fitting together like that perfect piece. That's something you can talk quote in there, and it says, crave the results so intensely that the work is irrelevant. So we all know once you get to the top, there's only that 1% difference, and it could be 1% in each of these areas that's going to make the separation between the very top elite team and everybody else underneath them. So if you crave that result so intensely that the work is irrelevant, then none of this is going to feel like a chore. Okay, so first I mentioned that we're going to talk about is mental health. And again, another book recommendation. I'm going to talk about why I picked this one because there's quite a few out there. I'm going to start with a bit of a motivation or discipline sports psychologist slide talking about mental health, and then we're going to get a little bit more serious in the next few. But you guys should know that your mind is incredibly important, obviously. And for those of you who never thought about it this way, our mind is a muscle, which means we can train it to adapt, we can train our mindset, and we can make it stronger, we can make it more resilient. So your mind takes up, or your brain takes up 2% of your total body weight, but it consumes about 20% of our glycogen, which is our carbohydrate calories. So David Goggins, he's the author of this book, Can't Hurt Me. He has this quote and he says, you have to build calluses on your brain just like you callus your hands. And again, I love that quote because every time we get knocked down and we stand back up again, that's just adding to that callus. And every time you go through a traumatic experience or you lose a tough game, you're making yourself, your mind, more resilient. So I won't spoil too much, but David Goggins, he grew up quite overweight. At one point, he was 300 pounds. He had a learning disability. I think he only learned to read in high school. And the stars were not aligning for him in any way, shape, or form. He was abused when he was a young boy, but he had this vision of becoming a Navy SEAL. And he did everything he possibly could to become a SEAL, including that physical transformation, which was done, well, that's a newer picture, but he did transform. He lost over like 150 pounds in a few months to prepare for the Navy SEAL tryouts because they told him either you do this or you don't have a shot. And what I love about that picture is a lot of people would look at that and only see the physical transformation. But the most important thing he transformed was up here. It was his mind. He also talks a lot about motivation versus discipline. So you're not always going to be motivated. So you can't rely on motivation. You're not always going to wake up and think, yeah, this is the day that I'm going to run 10 kilometers. You have to be disciplined instead. So a discipline is like making a commitment to yourself. So it's a promise to yourself that you're going to keep even on your worst days. So question for you is, what are you doing today to take care of your mental health? And I mean that sincerely and honestly, because if I'm going to get real with myself, which this book will make you do, before I used to say, I take care of my mental health by going for a run. So when I run, I clear my mind and I organize my thoughts, and that takes care of my mental health. But that's not that 1% edge, because everybody else at this level is doing that. Everybody's exercising, everybody's extremely fit. So what's going to make the difference is, are you practicing your breathing? Are you meditating? Are you journaling? Are you taking a yoga and just sitting there with your thoughts? Are you taking time to reflect? All that stuff. So challenge yourself to come up with something that you can incorporate into your everyday routine that's just going to be for your mental health. Okay, so this is a bit more real talk about mental health, because stigma still exists and so many people are suffering in silence, especially our student athletes. Sometimes that we forget that there's no real difference between a physical injury and a psychological injury. For example, we have no problem if we break an ankle. We have no problem going to see a doctor, rehabbing it, going to physio, treating it, getting better. But if we're going through a really tough time and we're feeling depressive symptoms, very few of us are actually going to speak out and go seek help for that. So there's a huge stigma, and I think that we can really work hard towards turning that around. For the coaches on this call, I threw this website up there because there's some really, really great resources that you can take a look at. And there's no excuse right now, because during COVID, there's been a huge influx of webinars and symposiums, conferences, actual paper resource guides that you can access online. And this is going to help you establish a culture for your team that incorporates mental health and gives you a bit of a strategic game plan on how you can start those conversations with your team. And I do think that right now, this has to come from the coach, because it's very hard for these young athletes to bring some of these symptoms and things up, if they're having a tough time even realizing that what they're going through. So this is a study that was done for NCAA college athletes, and you can read the stats up there. They're pretty interesting. Suicide is the #2 leading cause of death among athletes. That blows my mind. That's huge. And again, it's huge because we aren't talking about it that much. And this is a bit of a side story, but I find it pretty interesting. So I work with police officers on a daily basis, and I'm constantly encouraging them to go see a psychologist to establish a really good connection and relationship with them, even if they feel like they don't need to. Because when it gets to the point that they need to talk to somebody in that line of work, it's too late. That's usually when they've already reached their breaking point, their tipping point, when they've already experienced a critical incident, and now these symptoms have piled up and they're experiencing either PTSD, extreme burnout. They are in a situation that they just absolutely don't know what to do. And that's because there's a huge stigma with athletes, also with law enforcement, that if they go see a psychologist, it's going to hurt their chances of progressing their career, or they might be set to office duties or whatever. So, and the funny thing about this is that they will turn around and once we're done our serious conversation, they'll say, "Oh, Kristen, how's curling going? Yeah, are you working with a sports psychologist?" And I say, "Yeah, I am." And then I tell them about some of the cool exercises that I've done with a sports psychologist. And again, it's hilarious because you add in sport in front of it, and then a lot of people think it's really cool. But what I'm going to challenge you guys, again, to be that 1% better, is I hope you're working with a sports psychologist regularly, especially during COVID, especially if you didn't have much of a season this year. So if you're not, you need to get one. And number 2 is that you should be seeing a regular psychologist, somebody that you can establish a really good connection with now, because then if you do go through a really tough time in your life, that person is going to know what your baseline is. So if you're going to see a psychologist again after a critical incident or something happened, they're not going to know what your normal is. So they're not really going to know how to fix that maybe. And then that's where people get frustrated and feel like there's no point to go see anybody. So it's not for everybody, but something that you should all consider, because I think we do need to normalize that a little bit more. Okay, so just another slide to really drive this home and erase the stigma a little bit more in your mind. So there's some huge potential consequences you can see here. Okay, I'm going to play this video for you. Again, just want to remind you all that you should be creating a safe environment with your team. You should have that relationship with your coach that you feel that you can bring this up without being penalized. Don't suck it up, huddle up. So this is a really, really great video.
Okay, I know we're down right now, but we're not out. Let's regroup and let's get back on track.
This is my fault. I'm just not really feeling myself right now, and I just can't really seem to keep up with my schoolwork.
I just really miss my family right now. I don't know what I'm doing here without them.
Honestly, I never feel happy anymore. I was barely able to get out of bed for this. I don't know if I can keep going.
I know our backs are against the wall right now, and some of these things in our lives, they just feel like out of our control.
You guys have to know that these feelings can be normal.
We support each other, no matter what. Depression, anxiety, stress.
These mental illnesses are not weaknesses, okay? You'll not be looked down upon or looked at as less of a person.
You never know when these things may pop up, but one thing you can be certain of is that we are a family.
Every person here cares about you. If one of us falls, we
Can't deny that. But it's not so important that we can overlook our mental fitness as well.
1 in every 4 of us is going to experience some form of mental challenge throughout our lives, and it's our job as our teammates to help each other out and to look out for each other.
It's hard work that overcomes obstacles on the court.
and it's hard work that'll overcome them in the real world.
We fight as a team.
We train as a team.
We live as a team. Let's do it.
Heat on 2.
1, 2, heat!
Okay, I'm gonna give you another example, again, relating it to first responders, but this can be, you can relate to this as well. So with first responders, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is don't know when they're going to get caught up in a critical incident or trauma and potentially be exposed to a very horrific scene. But what they can do is train their mindset and be mentally and physically fit for duty, because you want to do everything you possibly can do in your power to prepare yourself so that if you do face a situation like this, you're going to be able to cope and recover from it. And I think that we forget about that as curlers too, because yeah, thinking back to university when things were really busy and I would be writing finals and then playing in provincials. And then one year we lost the provincial semifinal and I was so stressed with everything going on. And I just remember that the 2 weeks after that was not a happy time for me. And a lot of things can influence how you're going to be able to cope with all those stressors that you're going to be experiencing. So things that can influence this are relationships. Did you get in a bad fight with your siblings prior to? Did you get enough sleep? How was your diet leading up to this event or this game or this critical incident? Were you stressed financially? What was overflowing on your plate? And again, this ties into all things wellness. So that was a bit of a serious note for those couple slides. We're going to lighten it up a little bit, but we cannot forget to talk about mental health. Okay. Physical health. I know everybody loves this one. This quote here, I'm going to read it to you. It says, "The vision of a champion is someone who is bent over, drenched in sweat at the point of exhaustion when nobody else is watching." And I love this quote. I can't get enough of it, because I think that it's really cool that it's telling you that you can be a quiet professional and you don't have to showcase or showboat everything that you're doing. But sometimes the greatest thing we can do for ourselves is be totally selfish. And if you feel that taking care of your body and getting that workout in, but missing family time or missing time with your friends, and you're going to get a hard time about this, but if you feel that that's a priority that needs to happen in your day, then make it happen. Because if you're going to be in a better physical and mental state to show up for other people, they're going to appreciate that a lot more than thinking that you're selfish. I don't know if that kind of makes sense or not, but I love the feeling of being exhausted, and I love it even more when that happens in the gym. I'm drenched in sweat and there's nobody around. I love when it's just myself. It's my happy place. So don't always be doing things just to impress other people is what I'm trying to say here. Okay, we're going to talk about kind of each of these topics because I'm assuming that most of you do have a pretty good workout plan. If you don't, feel free to email me. I've got a few that I could send your way. Some different programs, various weeks long. But I think that most of you had a conference a little while ago, and I think that so maybe he gave you some good pointers. But I'm just going to give you two here on the next slide that I think can really help. Okay, so I'm going to talk over this video. So these are bod ropes, and I got these this year, and they have been a huge game changer. So they're $15 from Amazon. They are weighted at the end here, and you skip with them. What I love about these is that these are really good for pregame warm-up in a curling rink where you don't have much space. You don't need much space. You're hopping up and down with these. They're also really good for being at home, working at home, being in school at home when you're on Zoom and you need to take a quick break and you need to get some cardio in, but maybe you don't have a treadmill or elliptical, whatever. Get yourself a pair of these. Huge game changer.
What are they called again, Kristen, please?
I think the simple term is weighted skipping rope, cordless rope, or a bod rope.
Bod rope. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, and the other thing, and I hesitated putting this in there, but again, I feel that most of you are probably taking pretty good care of your fitness. So I think that you're maybe advanced enough to try this. But this exercise is kind of blowing a lot of minds right now in the personal training world, because one thing that we've always been taught as curlers, especially when we're doing lunges and squats and things like that, is that don't ever let your knee go past your toe. But I think that it's true for a lot of exercises for perfect technique and form, but it doesn't help your knee in a curling sense at all. This exercise builds knee resiliency. And I just started actually working with a new trainer, and he brought this to my attention. And I argued him to the death on this, but I've since done some research. I've looked at some videos, and I'm not going to play this for you, but you can look this up on YouTube. There's many different adaptations, modifications to this exercise, but one of the number one injuries that we experience as curlers is usually our knees. Not at this age, but everybody that I've talked to that's older than me has complained at some point about their knee. And you don't want that to be the reason that you have to put your equipment away early. So I think that's groundbreaking for curlers. On is that everybody can perform their best. So you usually pick a practice time. Oh, am I cutting out here? Am I good? Somebody let me know.
You were cutting out a little bit, but it isn't enough to detract from what you're saying.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, just let me know. So usually we pick our practice times when we want them. But I don't think that you should do that. And that's one thing that I've really challenged with, that I've really focused on challenging myself with this year, is that you should pick out workout times and times to practice when you really don't want to. So I love to get up and get moving first thing in the day. And usually I'm working out at 5 or 6 a.m. My worst time of day is supper time to work out. And that's now when I go see my trainer and when I'm doing all my fit testing, because that is how you build resiliency. When you absolutely hate what you're doing, you will learn to build resiliency from that. And then the other thing with curling practice is that, and this is simple, during a competition, you're going to be playing games at all times in the day. And I've played on teams where, okay, it's an evening game. I know that my teammates are in their happy zone and thriving during that late game, but they hate the morning game. So I'd be praying and hoping that we wouldn't put ourselves in a position that we had to play an early game. But that's something that we shouldn't even have to consider or think about in a competition. So switch up your times. Don't always practice Wednesday at 4 p.m. Practice in the morning, practice at 10 p.m. at night. Build that resiliency. Okay, sleep. So Daryl Horn is a Curling Canada coach, I believe, or he was in the past. I did some coaching with him at Curl BC. And during one of the camps, he said, without a doubt, sweeping is the most undercoached, underpracticed, underappreciated, and underrated aspect of the game. And I believe that this is the exact same for sleep. And I think this is not only true for athletes, but everybody. Some people think sleep is boring, and I used to be one of those people, but sleep is absolutely the opposite of that. It is recovery for your brain. So for your mind too. Well, they're both the same, but if you think about an ultra marathoner, they would go out and run a race, and then afterwards, for a couple of days, they're out of commission because they're recovering their bodies. We need to do the same for our minds. We have so much stimulation throughout the days right now. If you're at school or if you're at work, we're on our phones, we're on technology constantly. We need to depower and rejuvenate and give our minds that break that is really needed. So these are the national sleep recommendations. So just like we have the Canadian Physical Activity Guidelines, this sleep guideline, I think, will start to be more incorporated. But for all of us on this call, we're going to be between 8 and 10 and 7 to 9 hours of sleep required. So that, I like to look at this, especially when I'm talking to shift workers, is that at the end of the week, you're looking for that optimal range. So whether you get that through napping throughout the day in bouts or just continuous good night sleeps, it's kind of all the same. So it's more cumulative than making sure that you get this amount of sleep every single night. This is a very interesting stat. 18 hours without sleep is equivalent to a blood alcohol level of 0.05%. Having a 0.05% blood alcohol concentration in Alberta will give you a DUI. We wouldn't show up to a curling game in a drunk state. So how is it that we think that it would be okay to perform completely sleep deprived? And if I look at that stat and I think back to university days, I technically was curling Super League in that drunk state quite often, which was not good. And I really, again, focused on my sleep throughout this pandemic, and it's making a huge, huge difference. The other thing I want to mention is that we all know that we should be getting at least 10,000 steps in a day. And lots of us have tracking devices, whether it's your watch or your phone or your Fitbit, your Apple Watch. We're tracking our activity and our heart rate lots of the time, but you should be tracking your sleep as well. And we have the technology to do that. Okay, sleep is recovery. So take a look at this infographic. You just kind of read it as I'm talking. This infographic is ILM.
Steve, would you mute, please? Sorry, Kristen.
Oh, that's okay. So YLM, if you follow them on Instagram or Facebook, they come up with these really neat visuals, which are awesome because they do a lot of studies and then they break down a lot of studies. And as you're scrolling through Instagram, I come across these quite a bit and I'm constantly learning from them. So a really great resource. When it comes to sleep, there's a few strategies that you can do in order to make your sleep better. So the main ones are that we want to limit caffeine consumption at least 6 hours prior to sleeping. And every bit of caffeine you have 6 hours prior, within that 6 hour window leading up to going to bed, is going to influence how you can fall into your REM deep and light sleep. Your bedroom should only be used for sleep. So I know that's a challenge with the world being largely on Zoom, for example, right now, because lots of us are sitting on our computers in our bedrooms, taking classes, doing work, but you need to keep that space just for sleeping, because just like you want to be able to leave work at work and at the end of the day, turn off the lights, close your door and walk out of your office and say goodbye and hello to your other outside life, we should be able to kind of mimic that same feeling in our house too. So I encourage you to try to do that if you haven't already. Create a space that's just for learning or just for working. It's going to help your sleep. And we're all connected on our phones. So a lot of us are like this in our beds with our phones right close to our face and we're looking through social media. That is so bad. It's so bad for you because number one, you're stimulating your mind with all the content that you're reading. And number two is that blue light can actually disrupt the melatonin production throughout your sleep, which is a hormone that is needed for recovery. A good example of this is, or one thing I like to do at least, is my boyfriend, he works on the emergency response team with RCMP. So they get called out to the high critical incidents. And when he comes home after a critical incident where they worked all night or 24 hours straight or whatever, he'll go to sleep and maybe he's sleeping for 7 hours, but I always check his watch, his fancy watch after, to see what stages of sleep, what levels he fell into. And lots of times that whole 7 hours will be light sleep because he was so overstimulated and had so much adrenaline, probably a lot of caffeine, all these things, these factors playing into that. And maybe he's trying to sleep when it's daylight and he doesn't have a completely blacked out room. He's not falling into that REM or that deep sleep that you need for recovery. So take note of that, because you can trick yourself thinking you're getting enough sleep, but you're not actually. I'll just let you guys take a quick read of this. Okay. The third dimension is social health. So for this presentation, we're going to talk about this in the context of connection and relationship. So how connected are you to your teammates and coaches? And that is a very general question. So I left it open, creative with how you want to approach social health in a curling sense. But I like to think about it as my relationship with my coaches and those that have really influenced me and my teammates. So I thought Melissa might be on this call, but maybe she can watch the recording. She doesn't know this, but she was our team leader when we went to Worlds in 2017 in Korea. And she knew what I was thinking all the time at every moment, I think, because she was sending me constant quotes and pictures, all very inspirational and positive, obviously, but they were always kind of at that perfect time. So I've kept screenshots of all these, and one day I hope to make her a little bit of a scrapbook and return the favor of how much she influenced me during my time at Worlds. But your coaches can have a huge impact on you as an athlete, and they truly want what's best for you. So I challenge you to think of all the inspirational, wise people in your life, whether that's a mentor at work or your neighbor, everybody that's older than you basically probably has something really important to share with you, and they're just waiting for you to ask them. I have 3 kind of stories that I wanted to share about 3 coaches that really had an impact on me. And so Melissa at Worlds, I remember we were heading into playoff day, and we had just lost our last round robin game, I believe, or the semifinal. I can't remember exactly how that went. But we ended up playing in the bronze medal game. And I was really bummed about this. I did not want to be in that bronze medal game. I wanted to be in that gold medal game. And Melissa could tell, it was very obvious, it was very written all over my face that I was not happy to be there that morning. But she pulled me aside and said, you got to turn this around, because your attitude right now is not getting you a bronze medal, that's for sure. And she said, suck it up, Buttercup. You're not getting that gold, you're not getting that silver, but you want to come away with a medal, because down the road, that medal is going to mean the world to you. And I get goosebumps talking about it, because that bronze medal, yeah, it means more than a gold or silver ever could. And that has really driven my hunger for the game, to be honest. So coaches are awesome is what I'm saying. But Rob Krebs, he's another guy that had a lot of influence on me. The first time I heard him speak was at a Kevin Martin camp. I think I was about 15. And he said, draw a line in the sand and cross it. And once you've crossed that line, draw another. So always keep progressing. You cannot be a master of this game. It's impossible. There's always something that you can work on. And Gary Kader, he also coached me at the U of A. So he's a pretty funny guy. He's kind of like God. I see him as God anyways, because he's a pretty wise guy. But a lot of times in our pregame meetings, he would talk about stories that had absolutely no relation to the game. We're not talking about strategy. We were not talking any tactics. We weren't talking about the other team, how we're going to play, nothing. And a lot of those times we'd walk away and go, what the heck was that? But it was giving us so much perspective. And I'd always think back to his stories when I was in the moment, in the heat of the game, and think about what the lesson that story taught me. So it worked apparently, because he's had a lot of success coaching. And the first event that I had the chance of being one of his athletes at was when Team Alberta took me as their 5th player to Worlds in 2015, Kelsey Rock's team. And I actually never stepped foot on the ice once. I never got to play. I was out there for a few practices, but that was it. And it didn't really matter to me at the time, because I was just very humbled to be there. But there's a few times I was just itching to get out there. And luckily, the 5ths could still get a medal, even if they hadn't played, which is not always the case. But I didn't really understand why it was. And so on our way home, after 36 hours of travel coming back from Estonia, Gary pulled me to the side and said, Kristen, I'm sorry you never got to play. Oh, there's Melissa. You get her. There we go. He said, I'm sorry that you never got to play, but the reason is that I want you to earn your way here truly. And that was a bit of a turning point for me as an athlete. And I will always remember that moment, because he said, you'll get here one day as your own skip, and you'll earn your way here with your own team. And that is what drove me 100% to get to Worlds 2 years later. And yeah, that was just a really, really cool moment. Maybe you guys can share some at the very end in our discussion. Okay, talking about financial health here. So I'm not going to talk too much about this because everybody's at a bit of a different stage right now with their financial health. But I do want to bring up the topic of scholarships, volunteering, and coaching. So there are a lot of scholarships that are available to curlers, and there's more and more every year. So the two I know that are national are the Sandra Schmirler Scholarship. I would highly recommend that you apply for those if you haven't already. I got this Schmirler scholarship 3 years in a row, but the first year that I got it, I was alongside Jocelyn Peterman, Shannon Burchard, Kathy Award, some fantastic players that are owning this sport right now. So it's neat to see that transition happening, but not too long ago, they were all students as well. And so you're going to meet a lot of people from across the country when you apply for these scholarships, and the way that you get connected with all the recipients afterwards. And coaching, all of you should be volunteering to try to coach some of those juniors, try to give back to the sport. Don't limit yourself to the province you're in. I live in Alberta, but I coach at the Curl SAS camp and I've coached at the Curl BC camp. So get to know people, spread your network out, and try to get involved all across Canada, because you truly never know where you might end up. Okay, so number 5 is intellectual mental stamina. So if you can read this, your mind is filling in the gaps, which is pretty cool. There's a lot of these fun images on the internet. If you look them up, and they're kind of fun, they're mind games, that's for sure. But what I want to talk about here is how many of you actually visualize. So visualization actually utilizes the same neural pathways as physically doing the task, which a lot of people don't truly realize. At the beginning of COVID, again, talking with my sports psychologist, I said, okay, if I'm not going to be on the ice, I need to be visualizing, because I need to keep my mental game sharp, and I need to be kind of practicing stimulating those neural pathways, same as I would if I was actually on the ice. So one challenge we came up with was actually writing down a bunch of different shots on sticky notes. So I had about 50 sticky notes that I wrote down, a peel, a freeze to the back 8, a double takeout, whatever the shot was. I wrote down every factor that could possibly be involved in making that shot. So what percentage I wanted my sweepers to be involved, what turn it was, who was in the crowd, who was watching, who we were playing, what end it was, what the score was. I tried to make it as specific as possible. And then every time I'd go to do a workout, I'd grab one of those sticky notes, and that would be the shot that I would focus on for that entire workout. So with every exercise that I was doing, I was thinking about that shot. I was playing it over and over and over again in my mind. I still do this, and I would make it every single time. And so I guess we'll see how that translates on the ice. I hope it makes a difference. I'm sure it will. But these are some different things that you just have to get creative with, but you should be incorporating into your routines right now, especially if you're not on the ice. The other really good thing about working out and visualizing is that it gets your heart rate up, the same as it would when you're under pressure in a game and trying to make that big shot. Okay, we're on the home stretch here, so we're getting to our discussion quickly, but number 6 is spiritual health. And I know that not everybody's religious, but spiritual health does not have to mean religion. Purpose ride shotgun to passion. So another book recommendation, this one, it's written by one of the survivors of the Humboldt Broncos bus crash. His name is Caleb Dahlgren, and he's from Saskatoon. I grew up and actually competed in track with some of these gentlemen. Some of them did not make it in this crash, and I'm sure that some of you on this call, you're kind of the same age as you maybe knew of somebody that was involved. Very tragic situation. And we curled in Humboldt for provincials like right after this happened, or I think it was within a year. So what I want to say about that is that always perspective. So losing out in the semifinal that year wasn't as tough as it normally would have been with that symbol on the ice. Just a good reminder. So, and I don't mean to put a damper on things, but the question I have for you with this slide is I want you to consider all the identities that you own right now and which ones you want to work towards becoming. So Caleb, throughout this book, he's got so many identities. He's an athlete, he's a son, he's best friends to many people. He's a student, he's a volunteer. He's starting up a diabetes foundation. He's got so many identities. And what is so important about that is if he only had a single identity as a hockey player and all of a sudden he's lucky he's able to play hockey again, but if he had an injury that took that away, you don't want that to take away your single identity. So that's a tough question.
You're freezing quite a bit now, Kristen.
You're a fisherman. Cutting out?
Yeah, Kristen, you're cutting out a little bit more than you were previously.
Okay. What was the last thing that
you were talking about Caleb and coach, fisherman.
Okay. I'll just switch over to my hotspot. Give me 2 seconds here. Okay, sorry guys, it's not going to let me do that.
Well, we'll persevere. That's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're almost wrapping up here. So I was just saying that I challenge you to write down the identities that you currently hold right now and all those that you want to work towards in the future. And one of my best friends challenged me with that again, right when COVID started. She said, okay, what are you going to do now? Are you going to try to get on a committee? Are you going to try to start up a foundation? Are you going to volunteer? And at first I thought, no way, I don't have time for any of that. But she's the one that said, you need to spread yourself out and you need to get more involved with the community and all these things, because it is so important. Okay, occupational health. This slide, I just kind of wanted to talk about being a student athlete and encouraging you guys that you can persevere through those tough times of having to study on the road and curl. And we all know what it's like to come home from a competition. I remember coming home from Korea, the jet.
Yeah, you're frozen again.
At the shoot.
Okay, so you were at the jet lag coming home from Korea.
Okay, so yeah, I was just saying that we came home from Korea and there was a lot of jet lag, and the next day this at the center because we were going to use sports nationals. I had a few midterms to write that I was studying for while we were competing at Worlds. I even wrote one on the plane, actually had a coach proctor it. Came home, you're studying, you're trying to catch up, you're trying to get ahead for the next competition that you're going to be at. And yes, it's very hard to manage everything, but you really will learn a lot of time management skills that will stick with you for the rest of your life. And they always say that the busy people truly get more done. So another quote from the book Relentless is, don't let the naysayers take up space in your head and live rent-free. So if anybody tries to tell you that you can't do something or that you need to focus solely on curling or solely on your career and university, don't listen to them. You can definitely do both. Okay, so I just wanted to share this challenge with you guys. This was a challenge that I did at work for fun with our serious crimes branch. So if you've heard of 75 Hard, that challenge is kind of circulating on social media right now, but it has similar rules to the ones listed below. So we did this for 30 days and we just made this up on our own, but we factored in a few dimensions of wellness, including nutrition, exercise, sleep, mind, and social. So everybody got to pick one of the 3 rules listed for each category to create 5 rules that they had to follow every single day. And if they didn't follow at least, they had to get all 5. So if they didn't check off their social box, they did not get a check mark for that day. And we challenged them to get at least 25 of these 30 days. And I'm just sharing this with you because I would really encourage, again, while it's COVID and while we're not on the ice right now, that you come up with a challenge for your teammates, get some neat prizes involved, get your coach involved, get your families involved, and have some fun with it, play around, but try to incorporate all dimensions and not just something physical. If you need some ideas, I've got lots of them, so send me an email. All right, I'll let you read this. This ties in everything that we've talked about, everything that I've questioned you on or challenged you with. It's all a choice. So choose your heart and pick wisely. Okay, so we'll get into a discussion right now. I love this. Be a master of your craft. Invest in yourself, invest in your health. And this video will play at the very end. It's about 10 minutes long. So if you want to stick around for it, you can. But if you need to get going, that's okay too. You can look this up on Google later. But I just wanted to share a bit of a story here. So this is kind of funny, but I'm back to being a student again. So I work full-time as the mental health educator for the RCMP. But as of last week, I just got accepted into fire and rescue training. That's why I was taking the ice rescue course. So I'm going to become a firefighter and I'm still working for the RCMP. So I'm back to trying to balance everything again. And already within a week and a half, I've had the privilege of learning from all of our instructors work full-time on the job currently. So they're all firefighters. Today, we had an instructor that just came off a shift of 24 hours and then taught us all day long. And she spoke the entire day. And that was inspiring for me. I also had a deputy chief instruct, and he's got 39 years of experience, and he was teaching us as fire cadets. And a lot of your coaches and some on this call are those people. So really, again, pick their brains, ask them tough questions, start those conversations and learn as much as you possibly can from them. I asked the deputy chief, I asked him if he could tell himself as a fire cadet 39 years ago, something in relation to how he could build his resiliency as opposed to operational tempo, so not actual job duties, but something that would callous his mind. What would that be? What advice would he give to himself? What advice can he give to us? And one thing that he said really hit home, because I did want to bring it up in this presentation, but he said, think about who you surround yourself with, because that also contributes to your identity and forms the opinion that others have of you based on who your circle is. And that's really important. So I want all of you to think about who you surround yourself with, who's the company that you keep, and are you doing the same for them? And if that's not the case, then you need to really reevaluate that circle of influence that you have. And one thing you can do is write down a list of the top 5 people in your life right now. So who are you closest with that's not family? And that list is an average. If you take the average of all those individuals, that's who you are. So are you proud of that average? Is there people that you need to exchange or get out of there? Some of those people are going to boost your average and some of them are going to bring it down. So just something to consider. And that kind of ties into environmental health, the bigger picture. So that's what I have for you guys tonight. Thanks for listening to me talk. That was about 1 hour and 15 minutes. And I just got Invisalign too. So I feel like I've been slurring and spitting and drinking lots of water. My mouth is very dry, but
Good thing we're not in person. We're all dry here, so it's all good.
yeah.
So if everybody would like to unmute, and if you have any questions or comments or maybe some experiences that you'd like to share with Kristen, now is your chance. So I won't unmute you. You have the ability to unmute yourselves. Elaine said she recorded your video and where you spoke about Melissa, and Melissa is on the call now. So
Awesome. I saw her join in right after I was talking about her. She probably has something to say. Come on, Melissa, you always have something.
Oh, yes. Any questions? People can go
Okay,
ahead.
I'll jump in.
Yay.
Yeah, sorry I missed it. I heard you spoke kindly of me, so thanks for that. I can't wait to listen to it. Kristen, I haven't known you very long, and I feel like I've known you forever. Our journey in at the Worlds was huge, as we know, and you've obviously earned a huge space in my heart, and I'm very proud of what you've done and what you've become now that I know you're becoming a firefighter. When you look back in the last 3, 4, 5 years, have your people, have they changed much, or do you feel you just keep adding to those around you that are helping you in your space?
Oh, that's a really great question.
Sorry.
Are you actually asking me to answer that?
I am asking you that. I just came up with it.
Wow. Ooh, putting me on the spot. Okay, I would say a bit of both. Absolutely, the people in my life actually have changed drastically over the past 5 years, but mostly because I've really come into figuring out who I am. And for all the players that are kind of around that 18, 19 years old, at that age, I thought I knew who I was. I had no idea. They say in your 20s that each year is like 10 years of how you feel that you're changing and you're thinking about the way you see things in the world. And yeah, I've definitely substituted a lot of people out because I want people that are going to challenge me every single day. And a lot of people that are my closest friends right now, I actually find them intimidating, but for good reasons, because they're really accomplished people and people that I look up to. And I think as you get older too, and Melissa, you could probably speak to this, not saying you're old or anything, but I think you just stop feeling like you need to hang out with some people. Like in high school, you kind of feel like you have to form your cliques, or you're forced to be around those people. But as you get older, you just want to be around the people that you enjoy being around.
Kristen, I have a favor to ask. Maybe we could stop the screen share, and if people are comfortable turning on their video, then we might be able to just put some faces and names together. So
Sure.
if
Does that work?
Yep, perfect. So if anybody wants to turn off their video and let us see you. Yay. Hi, Ben. Hi, Elaine. Are there any other questions or comments? Any experiences? Hi, Perry.
Somebody's got to have something.
I'll ask a question. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Elaine.
Kristen, recently you were invited to be in our Women in Curling Leadership group, and you came on that as a young athlete who was a scholarship recipient. And I'd just like to ask you, at this young age, obviously you have a massive education and personal experience in high-level sport and so on. But what do you feel your role as a leader amongst your friends and colleagues, aside from professionally, but more in your personal life or your recreational life?
Okay, that's also a really good question, and something that I started thinking a lot about during that conference. And I realized that being a leader right now in where I'm at with things is bridging the gap between kind of the elite curlers and the ones coming up. So I fit somewhere in between, and trying to make that jump from juniors to women's play is such a drastic gap. And so I think that we lose a lot of curlers because they feel like it's going to take them too many years to progress enough to be at that top level. So right now I'm trying to challenge myself to figure out how I can give back to the sport in the sense of encouraging all those women, young ladies, to stay in the game. And that's one, I guess, topic that we discussed a lot in the conference. And that conference was amazing. I had many moments of thinking, wow, I'm actually on the call with all these people, and some of you are on this call right now listening to me, which is very cool. But you're all individuals that I've looked up to. So creating spaces, and COVID's a really good environment to do that, but creating spaces where we can all come together and brainstorm and share the experiences of the really young curlers with the ones that have a lot to teach us. So trying to bridge the gap, because we all want to improve our sport and the awareness and get more people involved at all skill levels.
I have one more question, if I may.
Absolutely.
You shared your story about your disappointment at losing the semifinal at the Worlds, and how Melissa helped you find a way to get beyond that. That was a great story of resilience. Is that your biggest story of how you had a challenging moment that you met, or do you have another story that you could tell us when you had to really dig deep and use your skills at being resilient?
Oh no, sorry, I lost you there. Do you mind repeating that last part?
Yeah, you bet. So, so my question is, you did give us one really good example of enacting resilience. So, if you have another story of how you handled a challenging situation, great. But if not, could you just expand a little bit about what you did to meet that challenge?
Okay, sorry, I only caught half of that again. Are you asking if I have any other kind of resiliency stories similar to the one with
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me think for a second. Okay. Yeah, this one comes to mind, and it usually comes to mind when when I'm beating myself up in the gym and wondering why I'm doing that and I'm in that exhausted state. But I can't remember which. Oh, yeah, this was the first year I came to Alberta. So I'd played juniors in Saskatchewan and came to Alberta after I'd been the 5th player for Kelsey Rock's team at the 2015 Worlds. And then I came to skip the U of A Pandas team. And that was such a huge opportunity for me. And I had really high expectations, going back to the story with Gary saying that he wouldn't let me play at Worlds until I would skip my way there. And this is being really honest, but I wanted to go to Worlds. I wanted to come to Alberta, skip that team, take them all the way to Worlds and win, just like Kelsey Rock had done the year before. And yeah, I guess I went into that provincials, honestly, a little too cocky or high up on my horse, and it did not do anything good. And we lost the semifinal to a team that I believed in my mind all day long. And I was completely torn up, lots of emotions at that age too, and feeling like it was a waste of time that I made the move, and thinking like, what have I done and why am I here? And just feeling like I let everybody down. And Gary Kadair was coaching at that time. It's just so embarrassing looking back now, because I think that I'm a little bit stronger up here not to do that. But he said, get yourself together, pull yourself together. This is the first of many tough losses you're going to have as a curler. But if you're having these losses to this extreme, that means you're putting yourself in good competitions, and that it really means something to you. So he told me to suck it up, buttercup. And then the next day, Rob Krebs at the U of A, we were back to our regular practicing schedule, no time off. And he took our whole team into a room and said, if any of you are going to sulk about this and feel that you are entitled to win, then you can walk out this door right now, because you're not true athletes. And he had no sympathy for us losing. And I know that's a really hard opinion to have, but having a tough coach like that really puts you in your place, and it really grounds you as a player. So I actually look back at that provincials and think that it was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Awesome. Excellent. Any other questions? There's nothing in the chat at the moment. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to share?
Kristen?
Hey.
Hi. Real question. You're not that old, so you'll remember this a lot easier than Andrea will. But thinking back, we're really at an impasse in terms of dealing with keeping teenage girls in sport or in activity. Can you remember what got you through that really tough stage to keep you active? Like, what can we do to support the young girls?
Okay. Yeah, that's a really great question. I think that there's 2 stages that women typically fall out of the game. One would be similar to men's, and that's when you're going through that transition of post-secondary schooling or finishing high school and wanting to kind of move on with your life, but also wanting to push really hard as a curler, because we know that the champions now are getting that much younger. So those years are so crucial that you can't miss out on them and then expect to be playing in a national championship. And then the other time, I guess, for a woman would be when she wants to start to have a family, and maybe she wants to a lot of women take time off to have kids, and then some of them never return. So yeah, that's a great question, how we can try to keep women involved, or young ladies. I think what got me through, boy, Well, playing varsity sport. I think that, I guess one thing that we could really do is try to pick up varsity youth sport and get more colleges and universities to have those high level teams program, because every other university puts so much funding into their football and hockey teams, and then sometimes they leave curling to hang out and dry. And I don't mean to pick on the U of S, it's changed now, but one of the reasons I came to the U of A was because the U of S actually told us that we could not go compete and represent that university, even if we paid our own way. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, we have so many great curlers here, and those curlers could win a national championship, but you're not even going to let them because they didn't recognize curling as a sport. So I think that we need to start those programs up in more universities, and then try to push really hard for scholarships. When I went to university, there wasn't any curling specific scholarships linked to academics. So my scholarships were either strictly academic or the Curling Canada or Sandra Schmirler scholarship. So I think if we can get into the schools a little bit more and develop those programs, that will give athletes a lot more incentive to play varsity and curl at the same time. The other thing was playing varsity in a university that was so massive made me feel like it was high school over again. It was a lot of fun because there was so much community with all the players, especially at the U of A. You were working out with all the other high performance athletes at the end of school every single day, and you really felt like you were included and part of a bigger team than just curling. So I think we need to embed curling and keep it at the same level as all those other sports.
Did your high school have a strong curling program?
No, we had one teacher that knew a bit about curling, and so he took students out from grade 6 to grade 12, and he would try to coach 20 of us on sheets, and I would go every once in a while to try to coach, but I also wanted to play a little bit, but we didn't have any structure. I grew up small town Saskatchewan, so some of the bigger city schools, I guess, had better programs, but even high school curling was not a thing. It was more kind of that club separate level with the juniors and provincials.
That's what I think is part of the problem as well, is if we could embed it in the high school, then, it would give us a stronger base as well.
Yeah, that's something we talked about with the leadership circle was,
yeah.
And a lot of you guys on this call right now, one thing you can do to give back is get yourselves involved with Rocks and Rings with the program, and try to volunteer going into schools with the elementary classes and go into their gymnasiums and have some fun with Rocks and Rings and get them introduced to the sport, because again, you don't necessarily have that exposure to curling if it wasn't in your family or if you didn't see it on TV, because it's not like all the other sports just yet. It's getting there.
Great. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any in the chat box. And Melissa says you are truly an amazing person and a true ambassador for women for curling for young girls, for all. Thank you for everything you do. Very proud. We were all excited to see your journey continue.
That's very nice. Thank you, Melissa.
Yeah.
Also, Elaine, I was going to share, I actually forgot to mention this, but I remember when she spoke at one of our nationals, she was a guest speaker, and the theme of her speech was talking about how people are watching you, and kind of in the sense that you're always being watched, but in a good way. So all your actions, people take note of that. So on this call, for example, seminars, listening to presentations, maybe you want to volunteer to give a presentation. Those are all things that these coaches on this call too are noticing. Elaine, maybe you want to elaborate a little bit on that. But I do remember that was another aha moment for me as an athlete, that I could almost reiterate half your speech. So that really hit home.
It was a very short speech because I remember that we were hosting the juniors here in Victoria, and we thought, well, they don't want to listen to a speech at the banquet. It's all about them. And so people are, to all of the young athletes that are on this call, there are a lot of us here that are coaches, and the same message goes to you. Your provincial coaches, the coaches that are coaching against your team or watching you at provincials or watching you everywhere you are, we're watching the lovely things you do and the accomplishments that you make and the shots that you make and the shots that you don't make, but we're also watching how you conduct yourselves and how you thank the people around you for helping you on your journey. Thanks for mentioning that, Kristen.
That's great.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, sorry, I know we're getting tight in time, but that made me think of when they were selecting the Winter Games team. So the Winter Games was U16 and I was 14 competing in that. And I remember at the Canadian Winter Games, I don't know exactly who picked that team, maybe some people that are on this call, but a big reason just how they conducted themselves on the ice. So not a lot about their shot making or their stats for the week. Communicating with people and good body language. And that's such a huge part of the game. So keep that in mind always.
Well, if there are no more questions, shall we go to the video before we wrap up? And you're frozen again. Can you share your screen again, Kristen?
Yes, sorry, I was frozen there again. I'm just working on it.
Okay.
Okay. I'm just going to say thank you very much, everybody, for taking part on this call. We did go over for really that. And again, she was somebody I looked up to. She actually coached my mom a little bit. So the world is very connected, but we can all sign off after this video. So thanks, everybody. It was a pleasure.
I'll get the last word in, Kristen, if you don't mind. Okay. I'd like to thank you as well. It was a great holistic perspective to preparing and to perform and training. You've given us all a lot to think about and some interesting resources as well. Thank you so much for sharing. Years ago, I was in Germany working with their teams. This was decades ago. And the head coach at the time was Keith Wendorf. And he said, if the opposition is pedaling, then we have to pedal faster and harder to stay ahead. You've given us some tools to keep pedaling and to get ahead of the pack. So thank you so much for that, for sharing, and know that that we, while some on the call may be your competition, they're going to respect you even more. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrea. Okay, well, we'll play this video and then we'll say goodnight to everybody. So here it is.
Change the world, start off by making your bed. If you make your bed every morning, you will have accomplished the first task of the day. It will give you a small sense of pride, and it will encourage you to do another task, and another, and another. And by the end of the day, that one task completed will have turned into many tasks completed. Making your bed will also reinforce the fact that the little things in life matter. If you can't do the little things right, you'll never be able to do the big things right. And if by chance you have a miserable day, you will come home to a bed that is made. that you made. Tomorrow will be better. To pass SEAL training, there are a series of long swims that must be completed. One is the night swim. Before the swim, the instructors joyfully brief the students on all the species of sharks that inhabit the waters off San Clemente. They assure you, however, that no student has ever been eaten by a shark, at least not that they can remember. But you are also taught that if a shark begins to circle your position, stand your ground. Do not act afraid. And if the shark, hungry for a midnight snack, darts towards you, then summons up all your strength and punch him in the snout, and he will turn and swim away. There are a lot of sharks in the world. If you hope to complete the swim, you will have to deal with them. So if you want to change the world, don't back down from the sharks. Over a few weeks of difficult training, my SEAL class, which started with 150 men, was down to just 42. There were now 6 boat crews of 7 men each. I was in the boat with the tall guys, but the best boat crew we had was made up of the little guys, the Munchkin crew, we call them. No one was over 5'5". The Munchkin boat crew had 1 American Indian, 1 African American, 1 Polish, 1 Greek American, 1 Italian American, and 2 tough kids from the Midwest. They outran, and outswam all the other boat crews. The big men in the other boat crews would always make good-natured fun of the tiny little flippers the Munchkins put on their tiny little feet prior to every swim. But somehow these little guys from every corner of the nation and the world always had the last laugh, swimming faster than everyone and reaching the shore long before the rest of us. SEAL training was a great equalizer. Not your ethnic background, not your education, not your social status. If you want to change the world, measure a person by the size of their heart, not by the size of their flippers. The 9th week of training is referred to as Hell Week. 6 days of no sleep, constant physical and mental harassment, and flats are an area between San Diego and Tijuana where the water runs off and creates the Tijuana Sloughs, a swampy patch of terrain where the mud will engulf you. It is on Wednesday of Hell the world for the better.
That's awesome, Kristen. Make your bed.
Make your bed.
Make your bed.
Exactly.
I knew there was a reason I did that every day. Okay, thank you, everybody. And whoever's left on the call, I'd just like to remind you that April 7th is Melissa Kazan Fueling Competition. It's at starts at 7 p.m. Eastern. The deadline to register is 6 p.m. on April the 6th. So please, if you're going to register, do it by 6 p.m. April the 6th. The link to this recording will come out soon. I'm not exactly sure when, because we have a new system. We're not using Join Me anymore, thank goodness. So it's a little bit more complicated getting the recording out to everybody. But thank you all for attending, and hope to see you on the April the 7th. Thank you, Kristen. Good night, all.
Wonderful. Thank you. Have a great night.
You too.